For the great honor to be able to introduce for the first time ever anywhere the 45th President of the United States of America. For the great honor to be able to introduce
nation. In this one moment, it's just almost incomprehensible that they can exist right now. So,
And we are grateful.
so close.
Trigger warning. This podcast is intended for men. Not boys, not babies, men.
This is how we disable toxic masculinity.
We need to kill all men.
This pagan patriarchalism that is coming back out of the shadows.
Feminists hate patriarchy.
It's the woman that runs the show and the woman that runs the community and is the backbone of that area.
I'm a nasty woman. A loud, vulgar, proud woman.
Patriarchy. You are male privilege. Are you saying you have authority over me? Go get your superior.
I personally can't see why egalitarianism would be a bad thing.
The assumption that wives should make babies instead of money is part of the patriarchy.
Don't say hi to strange women you don't know.
Patriarchy. The patriarchy.
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 Let no one look down on your youthfulness, but rather in speech, conduct, love, faith, and purity, show yourself an example of those who believe. And that is 1 Timothy chapter 4, verse 12. You are on the Fight, Laugh, Feast Network, and you are listening to The Patriarchy. My name is Tony DePania, and I am joined by my co-host, Pastor Joseph Randall Spurgeon.
Woman, get back in here and make me a sandwich.
Joseph, what kind of sandwich are you eating today?
Well, Tony, I've been playing the lute all day long, just nonstop playing the lute.
Okay.
And you know what I have because of that?
No.
Menstrual cramps.
Okay. This is taking a weird turn now. What the heck? Worst sandwich segment ever. Oh, man.
It's really not funny. You should never joke about women's hygiene, period.
Oh, this is just getting worse and worse as it goes. Oh, no.
Okay, so I'm eating a Big Mac, by the way.
I don't care what you're eating. I don't want to hear about food right now. Oh. I hope no one is listening to this like right before you eat or during dinner or something. It's just, I hope you're not eating.
So what's the delicious thing that you're eating now, Tony? Called a sandwich.
I'm eating. I don't even know if I want to go there.
Were you about to say a tuna salad?
No,
sandwich?
I was gonna say I was eating spaghetti with meat sauce.
Okay.
No, okay. I don't even remember what I was eating. No, I can't get past what you just said. Oh my goodness, so gross. Okay, I don't even know. I don't know what I'm eating. I don't really haven't had a sandwich this week. I'll be honest. I haven't. We've mostly had like more full dinners and stuff. I mean, everybody's home now, so we're not really having to make anything quick. We might have had a peanut butter and jelly somewhere in there, but I don't know. I'm just glad that I'm eating anything at this point. I'm glad that I'm back up and not quarantined in my bedroom, and I've been cleared for return to Gen Pop, as I call it, with my family and kids.
Yeah. So you had the Corona.
The Rona. The Rona got me, as I said online. The Rona got the patriarchy, folks. I don't know. I don't actually know what I had. I was having trouble breathing. It felt like a gorilla was squeezing my chest. I was tired all the time. In fact, I still get tired easily, so I think I'm still getting out of it. But I don't know. They didn't take me seriously at first. I called the hospital. They basically were like, "Have you gotten tested?" I'm like, "No." And they're like, "Nah, okay, well, just stay home." And I'm like, "But I can't breathe. Like, my chest is hurting. That's not normal." And they're like, but we're prioritizing the coronavirus right now. So basically, if you don't have a positive test, you're your chopped liver to them. And then I ended up in the ER a week later because I didn't get better. And then I started getting better after that. They put me on like a double dose of an inhaler or something. But they did test me for the Rona, and the test came back negative. And I
love what Matt Williams said to you.
What?
From How to Build a Tent. He said it was good to hear you were just being a big baby.
Big baby. Yeah, that was funny. Everyone was so caring about that. Well, but here's the thing. It came back negative, but they're so confident of their own test that I was like, because I go, oh, great. So does that mean that that I'm not quarantined anymore? And they're like, oh, no, absolutely not. You're still quarantined because we're still pretty sure you have it. I'm like, but you gave me a negative result on that, the test that you're not even giving out to anybody until they end up in the hospital. And they're like, well, yeah, but you're still quarantined. I'm like, okay, well, really glad that test is so reliable. But regardless, whether I had the Rona or influenza or I don't know, who knows what the heck it was, I'm back out in Gen Pop and past the 14 days or whatever that is. And it's just nice to be up and about and doing stuff and eating sandwiches or whatever my wonderful wife prepares.
And playing the lute. Be careful about playing the lute.
Playing the lute. No. Stop. Just no. Stop it. I'm not going back to that. It's just no. It's not pleasant. Okay, we're moving on. We're moving on We're moving on to the next segment.
We want to salute somebody, don't we?
Yeah. Well, I don't know if we're gonna actually salute him. We'll find out why.
Okay.
Florida man, we salute you.
I dare you. I fucking dare you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I work it.
I literally dare you.
So for context, for people that are listening, because you don't have the video here, we're listening to a guy who's coughing on police officers that are arresting. I'm pretty sure this guy is drunk or something. He appears like this, but it gets worse after that. After he starts coughing. So here we go.
I hope you die.
I didn't.
I hope you catch corona. I hope the coronavirus. I hope it latches onto you. I hope it makes you puke.
That's a very pleasant man right there. Florida man is having a bad day. I hope you die. I hope it latches onto you, and I hope it makes you puke. Like he's a nice guy there.
The Florida man he's saying imprecatory Florida man
prayers. The Psalms of Florida man.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know about that. Yeah, so he's not being a very nice guy. I have no idea. I don't know the context. I have no idea why he's being arrested. I will say this, which I think will tie into what we're going to talk about, is I do think the officers handled that really well because they were actually being very calm in that video and quite nice to him. And I think they were exercising their particular station of authority, I think, quite well.
Yeah, they were being pretty merciful. It seems like temptation would have been just to lash at him and let's mace him or something.
Tase him. Don't tase me, bro. Yeah. And
so it's good to see those in authority showing mercy to those under them, and still, I'm sure they still arrested him, and they probably charged him with
coughing,
with something, with assault or something.
Aggravated coughing. Aggravated coughing. I don't know if that's a crime, but maybe he made it. Yeah, they did arrest him because part of that video was from the back of the police car, actually.
Yeah. So, well, speaking of mercy, and this is a great transition. Speaking of mercy,
it's a loose transition, but we'll make it.
Yeah. We wanted to talk today about being leaders and setting an example as leaders. We talk about men being built to build, fight, protect, and lead. And so we want to talk about men as leaders, wherever your station of authority is, whether in your home, in the church, in the civil realm, and practicing mercy as a leader and setting an example of mercy to those in your charge, especially in your home and in your church, or even as an employer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so now, when we talking about mercy, there's different, I would say, false definitions that people might have in mind. The typical thinking is that it's just immediately getting off scot-free with no justice. So we see mercy as the opposite of justice.
Mm-hmm. Right.
But you get to the Beatitudes. Jesus said, "Blessed is the merciful, for they shall receive mercy." But do you remember what the Beatitude right before that is?
Right prior to it?
Yeah, the one right before that one.
Oh, you're testing my memory on that. No, I don't remember what it is.
It's blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, right? Or and righteousness and justice are bound together. So this hungering and thirsting for God's righteousness, His justice, and then immediately followed that is those who are merciful. So they're not at odds with each other. Now, mercy has its own definition that we need to deal with. So we need to get a right definition. I think Thomas Watson has a good definition. What was his definition?
Let's see. Thomas Watson's definition of mercy is, I answer, it is a melting disposition whereby we lay to heart the miseries of others and are ready on all occasions to be instrumental for their good. That's a very good definition. I like that.
Yeah. So melting disposition. That's so it's a disposition of compassion, care for others. Tony, have you seen that thing with like Doug Wilson, the man who should not be named or whatever?
The man I don't do federal vision. I'm sorry. I don't do that. That's your thing. No.
Well, we're in quarantine. We should be safe from it for now.
That's true.
But no, I'm just kidding. So Man Rampant, and they talked about the difference between sympathy and empathy.
Empathy. Yeah. That was the first episode, I think, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. If you're listening and you have not watched that, you can find it on Amazon Prime. It's called Man Rampant. It's very good. It's a series of videos from Doug Wilson. It's great.
So it's pretty helpful, and the empathy has this idea of like, I need to jump into the situation with someone and like be all in, and just like it's no concern with actually help or anything else. It's like if somebody's drowning, empathy is you jumping into the water and drowning with them.
Let's drown together. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
No. Whereas sympathy is like pity. It's a melting disposition. That's why Matthew Henry says in his definition of mercy, this is what he says: those who are the merciful those are the merciful who are piously and charitably inclined to pity, help, and succor persons in misery. The succor persons in misery, that word is like, it's like a nursing. It's like a care for, a deep care for persons in misery.
Right.
So
I just received a gift of all of, yes, I didn't actually have it in my library before because I had it digitally. Everybody's going to make fun of me, but I actually got the full, unabridged, all of Matthew Henry's commentaries as a gift, I believe from my parents, actually, I think this past Christmas. And I've loved Matthew Henry before, but I think because I have it actually in book form, I've been reading a lot of it, but he has great insight on a lot of things.
Oh yeah, man. Whenever I'm studying for preaching, I always go to him and John Calvin's commentaries on any topic, and they're always so helpful.
Yeah. Those are two. Yeah, exactly.
Now I often have to be careful that like I first study the passage and outline it and get it ready myself, because after I read them, I'm tempted to just throw out what I did and just go with what they did.
I know the feeling. Yeah, I know, because you're reading something and you kind of, because I like Matthew Henry, I like John Calvin, I love their commentaries, and so you automatically want to go read. Man, I wonder what they had to say about it. But yeah, I do the same thing where I'm like, okay, no, I actually gotta figure out what I'm reading here first, and then I'll go do that. Yeah, I get you.
Now, they're helpful. And so going back to that definition of mercy is one with pity. And for those in authority, that's that can be a hard thing at times to have for someone. It's very tempting to lord over those under your charge.
Yeah, it is.
But our God, who has all authority in himself, from which all the fatherhood gets its name, what's the Bible say about him? That he knows our frame.
Mm-hmm.
Which means he has pity upon us. He knows that we're weak, that we fail, that we mess up, and so he has pity upon us. And so as we think about being leaders, one of the characteristics of a leader is to have pity, to know the frames of those under us. That's why 1 Peter says about husbands, how are they to live with their wives?
Yeah, as they're the weaker vessel.
Yeah, in an understanding way, with some pity on them.
Right.
One of the things that we need to be careful about is, as we learn and we're getting excited about men being men and about being leading in your home, to go from one ditch to the other. So the one ditch of passivity, or just no leadership, to like you're the drill sergeant in the home.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And now everybody, you're barking commands and everybody's jumping to your orders, but you're not living in any understanding way.
Well, that was our Barney Fife episode. Remember, we were talking about how you realize you need to do something and you kind of just go full tilt in the other direction. And yeah, that's a danger for any man. I mean, I don't know about you, but I have to watch it even too when I realize maybe my kids are a little more out of control than they ought to be, or they're not listening to their mom. And yeah, there's times I got to check myself in that too, that I don't become a tyrant in my own home.
And my wife has been helpful at that at times, when I'm tempted to be like, I told them to do something, they got to do it right now.
Mm-hmm.
She'll be like, well, hang on a second. Give them a second to get it done. Right. Or, have some pity. This kid is having a meltdown because he hasn't had a nap and he's ready for bed.
Yeah, I've got that. My wife says this. Yeah. We have good women in our lives. Yeah, because my wife said the same thing to me too. And she'll be like, "He's 2. He didn't take his nap today. It's 8:00 at night. We've been gone all day. Like, give him a minute." Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, and that's why wives have that nurturing. Mm-hmm. Mothers are nurturing, and we need them. As I think about this, the coronavirus, it'd be hard to talk about an episode without going into it.
Yep.
You think about how different governors or different local civil magistrates have reacted. And some have had more compassion and pity on those they are in charge of, while others have moved towards more of a Barney Fife type.
Yeah, they're carrying that gun and they're going to let you know.
Yeah, I think sometimes the more authority you have over someone, like that, and what I mean is that the more the consequences are for their disobedience, the more you need to have some kind of understanding and work to rule by influence just as much as you do by command.
Mm-hmm.
And that goes good for those who are employers, right? You have a great amount of authority because their job is at stake, their livelihood. And yeah, you can expect people to obey your commands, and you do command, but a master needs to have mercy and pity and rule often by his influence, his example.
I think one of the ways that's good to do that, I have in my day job. Yes, this is not actually my job, people listening. I hope it is one day. But my day job, I work in IT, and I have people that work underneath me. And I have tried real hard, and you do have to push yourself to do it too, because it's like what we're talking about. It's tempting to abuse your authority, right? But I have to push myself real hard to make sure that consistently, I take some of the harder stuff. Like, I see something something will come through, somebody's having a problem, and it's, anybody that works in IT will nod with me on this. It's, that person that you don't want to go deal with, like that nobody wants to deal with because they're mean or whatever it might be. And a lot of times, especially if I know like one of my techs is having a bad day or something, I'll just go, it's cool. I'll go take it. And I don't want, I'll be completely honest, I don't want to go take it. I'm thinking of the people in my head that I don't want to go take the ticket for, because it's not fun, but at the same time, like we're talking about, you do need to show mercy on, because, if you're constantly giving the people under you all the hard jobs, all the stuff that nobody wants to do, that's not merciful. That's being a tyrant. That's being mean-spirited and not loving them and not looking out for them emotionally or even physically, because stress will get to you after a while. But that's something I've tried to consistently do, and I think that's something that my parents actually instilled in me too. We had a family business growing up, and I would see my mom, especially when she was in, she would take a lot of the. We had anybody that's listening and maybe hasn't heard previous episodes. I grew up in the pet industry, the animal industry, and we had all sorts of crazy animals and stuff. But we had a pet store, a really large pet store actually back in the day, and so there's a lot of gross, things you need to clean up and do. Anybody that's ever worked in any of those industries knows that. And my mom would take those all the time. She was a great example of that even too. So the ladies that worked with her, and we had cleaning girls that would come in, girls that were in college that needed some extra money, whether in college or something, and they would come in, work, and do things. And she would take the gross stuff all the time. And I think that kind of just stuck in me, that it's like you don't always want to be giving out the hard jobs to people.
Did you ever have your pets' heads fall off?
Oh, okay. We got no jobs. We got no. Our pets' heads are falling off. Like, yeah. Dumb and Dumber reference. If nobody knows what we're saying, I hope you do. That's just funny.
Sorry.
True story. In college, in Bible college, I had a parakeet, and his name was Lloyd Christmas, which was one of the guys from Dumb and Dumber. I was going to name him Petey, but I thought that was a little too on the nose, so I just named him Lloyd Christmas. And yeah.
Nice. Well, hey, we've talked about mercy and we've given it a definition. And, there's a lot of ways that we can have a false idea of mercy. We've already talked about how it's not like we can almost see it at odds with justice. Another way to have like a false sense of mercy, Tony, is to only have it in like nebulous terms.
Mm-hmm.
So like everyone today loves to talk about love.
Yes.
Right. Love, 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 love. It's like
not real love, but yeah, I know what you're saying.
I know, but we're the lovingest nation on the earth. Give love a chance.
No, we're not. Yeah.
Like we wins.
Yeah. Yes.
But love and of course mercy is more than a nebulous feeling or some kind of high-minded concept that we show to some nebulous, ill-defined group of people. Mm-hmm. There's this quote by G.K. Chesterton, which he kind of rebukes that aspect of love. He says, there's a strange coldness and unreality that hangs about their love for men, their being modern, he says modern cosmopolitans or modern people. If you ask them whether they love humanity, they will say, doubtless, sincerely, that they do. But if you ask them, touching any of the classes that go to make up humanity, you will find that they hate them all. They hate kings, they hate priests, they hate soldiers, they hate sailors. They distrust men of science. They denounce the middle classes. They despair of working men, but man, they adore humanity. Right?
Yeah, that's a good quote. That's very true. Yeah.
And so true mercy and also true love involves practicing it to real people with real names that you really know. And that means like the people in your homes, the people under your charge, people with names, people around you, your neighbors, real people. It's easy to think and have pity upon the little pictures you see of people in Africa or some other place. but that pity doesn't actually move you to anything. Often, it's just kind of a pietistic feeling that you have while you look at the picture, and then you move on.
Yeah. Or you. Well, okay, and I'm not downplaying helping people financially, but what I was going to say is, where you send your check, you write your check once a month, and you send it, and then you don't think about them anymore.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Or you're like, so bringing this to the abortion thing, some people have some real pity upon the preborn, but it's like, well, and it moves them to make a little statement on Facebook, and then that's it.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Whereas real mercy starts with pity, and then that pity moves you to actually work on behalf, to do some work on to be instrumental for their good, as Thomas Watson says. That's
why I think it's so important to be out and about, and it's kind of funny to say that right now, right? we're not allowed to be, but I mean to be like, if you're in a place of authority, you're in a place of leadership, it's important to be out and about with and involved in the lives of the people that are under your authority. Because, the reason I thought of that is because I grew up, believing abortion was wrong, being taught abortion was wrong. And it's not that I ever really thought abortion was right or anything, but when it really started to sink in, and I think the first time I had real, genuine pity on unborn babies was the first time I went to an abortion mill, which happened to be in Chicago, and it sunk in, it sunk in because you were there, and you saw the mothers going in, you saw how hard-hearted they were, you saw how hateful they were to their own children. And right, actually, that was when my wife was actually pregnant with our first. And so, I was already in father mode at that point too. And then after my daughter was born, it was our first, then it was just, that was the last nail in the coffin of that, where it was like, how could anybody, murder their own child? And that sunk in. So anyway, my point in all of that is that I think it's very important to make sure that you're not just leading from afar and never actually being involved in the people's lives that, whether that's your family. I mean, I know people, this could be laughable, right? How could you not be involved in your family? It's possible. It's very possible to live in that house and not actually be involved in your family. And I think most men, if we're honest with ourselves, we have to remind ourselves of that too. We get distracted. We get focused on something else. We kind of just, like we were just talking about, right? You bark orders, and then I'm going to bark all these orders and tell them what to do, and then you just do it, and then you're kind of done. Well, that's not how it works. And to really understand, what is each of my children going through? What is my wife struggling with? What does she need right now? Even just in our own homes, I just think it's very important.
Well, Tony, we've kind of defined mercy and tried to work through what are some falsehoods. I think it'll be helpful here in a little bit to come back and kind of talk about different aspects, or what Thomas Watson says are 5 streams of mercy. But before we do that, let's go to our interview and talk with a young man who has authority in that he owns his own business and he leads others. And one of the things you're going to see in this interview, or hear in the interview, is just his willingness to own his own faults, his humility. And I think that plays right in with what we're talking about here with mercy.
So we're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to be on the line with Tanner Cartwright. So stick around. You are listening to The Patriarchy on the Fight, Laugh, Feast Network. We'll be right back.
This is Polly the Transparent with an important public service announcement. These yahoos over at the Patriarchy Podcast collaborated with some other yahoos over at Confessionalware to bring all their gun-toting, misogynistic, homophobic, Bible-thumping, brain-dead minion yahoos some Patriarchy merchandise. Yeah, they're actually selling t-shirts and coffee mugs to promote this trash. Even t-shirts for women. I'd say I can't believe it, but let's face it, These are the same buffoons that send boxes of Fruit Loops to my door addressed to the Fruit Loop that lives there who thinks he's a parrot. Intolerant pieces of garbage. Of course I'm a parrot. Anyways, this crap is available on confessionalware.com under podcast collaborations. Not that any normal person would buy that junk. Squawk. Hey, lady. Polly needs his papers changed again. The lack of service around this place is unbelievable.
We're on the line with Tanner Cartwright. Tanner grew up in Tennessee and now resides in Kentucky on a farm of about 4 acres. He owns his own construction company, and he is married to his wife of 6 years, and together they have 4 children with 1 on the way. Tanner, welcome to the Patriarchy.
Thanks, sir.
Tanner, you got 1 baby on the way. When that baby is due, what date do you want to set the baptism?
Well, I would rather my children be in the new covenant instead of the old covenant, Joseph.
Well, that's what baptism
Nice.
is for, man.
Yeah,
It is.
yeah.
Uh,
It says the new covenant.
Yeah, no, in the old covenant. Yes, sir. No, I'd rather them be in the new covenant in Christ, and I'll baptize them at that point.
So true story here. We're both Presbyterians, but I'm Credo and he's Paedo. So
Okay.
I'm on your side on this one.
Oh, okay, all right. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Unlike unicorns, unlike unicorns, we actually exist. So
No doubt. I've met a few of you.
yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Well, hey, Tanner, it's good to have you on the show, and
Yes,
wanted
sir.
to have you on and talk about your business. So what is it you do for a living?
So I build fence. I'm a own a small construction company, and we install fence, mostly agricultural, mostly big horse farms in Lexington, large cattle farms, that kind of thing. So I prefer large horse farms. I like working for rich people. So, but yes, sir. So been doing that for about, I guess, 3 or 4 years now since I came to Kentucky. That's actually the reason I moved up here.
All right. So you work on fences, but you have a team that you manage, right?
Yes, sir. So I've got 6 guys working with me currently. It's changed constantly ever since I started. Finding help is a problem. Right now, I'm actually partnered up with one of my brothers, and together it's me and him and 4 other gentlemen. And so yeah, sir, that's our crew there.
You're kind of a young guy to be leading, but which is a good thing. How long have you been managing other people, and is it the first time with this business, or have you been doing that in the past as well?
Yes or no? I kind of broke my teeth in there when I was younger. I worked for several landscaping businesses, and I was always just kind of a take charge kind of gentleman, and they would always just kind of probably because I always had more confidence than competence. But I made up for what I lacked in know-how and the confidence there, and so I would just kind of take charge, and so I ended up being put over, groups of guys doing landscaping, this, that, and the other, and then was a manager at a tourist location in Tennessee. Was the last thing I did in Tennessee before I came to Kentucky. I was a maintenance manager down there at a place, so was over quite a few people there.
So what was the first time you were put into like a management position? Like, take us through that for a sec.
I wasn't never put in the position as far as like doing the landscaping. It was a small company owned by a friend of ours, and we and my brothers would work for him and different people there. And
okay.
But no, as far as a management position, the first time was probably it was a little while after I was married, so I would have been 24, 25. But it wasn't a, probably not as grand as it sounds, but I was just a maintenance manager over, and I had to basically just make decisions for a lot of different things. It just, the outside, inside, there was a restaurant there, so I was just constantly all over the property, fixing things in the kitchen and just trying to keep things rolling. And I was basically in charge of getting anything fixed that was broken on the whole property. So
yeah.
Anyway, a lot of running.
What are some lessons that you learned kind of being early in managing? Like, how did you find your way in managing people and dealing with, people are sinners and you got different egos and all those things. What are some things that you learned about that?
Yes, sir. No doubt. Good question. I mean, one thing, everyone's different. And so everyone, you deal with people differently, obviously, but, one thing I think that was difficult for me was that recognizing that not everyone sees things the way I do, and not everyone is able to view things the way I do, and just learning to work with that and not give people too much, and just make sure within delegating that you're not delegating things that people can't handle, or delegating something and thinking you've explained it and you really haven't. But I struggle a lot, still do, with memory as far as remembering the details. I'm not good with the detail. I'm good with the big picture. I'm not as good with the details, and so writing things down, taking notes, things like that. Those were things that I had to learn out of just survival. Because you can't do anything really unless you write it down and remember it. But as far as dealing with people, I guess just being willing for me to take the time to slow down and make sure that they know what's going on. My dad really, I think, now that I'm thinking about this, taught me. He was always really good to slow down, and whatever he was doing, he would take the time to show me how to do it and show me what he was doing and explain it to me, and keep doing that until I got it. And he was always good about that, and he was very patient in that. And I've struggled with that a lot, still do, even with my kids there and whatnot. I struggle to explain things if someone doesn't understand it the way I'm explaining it, because it makes perfect sense to me. But you have to be gracious with people and where they're at, and we see things differently. So
when I asked you earlier today, you mentioned that I talked about how you work managing, and you said, "Well, I'm not really a good manager, but I'm a good leader." What's the difference in your mind between management and leading?
Yes, sir. So I would not view myself as a good manager, as far as I'm not incredibly organized. I'm not. I'm not on top of it in the sense of I can't. I'm not a good multitasker, and so I'm good on one thing at a time, and I can do that really well. But then I've got my wife laughs because she can multitask, and I literally just cannot. I'm not capable of it. But as far as, I just always remember, I guess my dad was a good example of it, just a great manager, because he was always just very organized, very on top of everything. And excuse me, I guess in my mind, as far as when we're working and we come upon a problem or anything like that, I'm good at making a decision and just being 100%. This is what we're doing. Let's do it, and just immediately start delegating and just keeping us rolling. And I guess that's what, as far as leading, I'm really good at that. I guess you say gifted in that, and just being able to just, if I'm in a group, I'm able to make quick decisions, troubleshoot, and keep everybody going, keep everybody rolling. But I don't feel like I'm a good manager as far as I forget details and always forgetting things and whatnot, not having everything I need on the truck and this, that, and the other.
So with that kind of leadership style, I imagine that there has to be a lot of trust for you of the people that you've given tasks to. So what have you looked for in the people that work with you that gives you like that kind of trust?
Yes, sir. Are you talking about me trusting them?
Yeah.
Yes, sir. No, 100%. So it has been a long process of finding good young men that I could trust and depend on, and the kind of work we do is really physically strenuous, and so it has to be young men. yes, sir, it's been a 3-year just struggle to find help, just like you're saying, that I can trust. I remember, I can't remember if it was this last year or 2018 in the summer. We did a lot of work, did a lot of out-of-state work. Couldn't find good guys and ended up just getting guys from basically anywhere. Ended up with some guys, and I didn't realize they were on drugs, and it was just a mess. And just basically it ended up I had zero help. And so I have slowly been just working on finding young men that are trustworthy and Christian young men. I actually hired 2 of my brothers, have come up from Tennessee. 3 now have come up from Tennessee and work for me, and one of those are now my partner. So that's kind of cheating, I guess, as far as finding good help. I just hired all my brothers. But I've got another young gentleman that's a Christian young man. He's a son of a pastor friend of mine from Frankfurt. And he's 100% trustworthy and good young man, hard worker. And so anyway, I've hired some Hispanics and they've worked for me. And the difficulty there is I've had a few tell me they were legal and ended up they weren't, and all those kind of difficulties. But they tend to be really, really good workers and willing to bust their butt. So.
Well, coupling on that, see, I grew up in a family business. My folks had their own business until I was grown, actually, and so I feel you on the finding good work, good workers.
Yes,
it's hard, especially certain seasons. For some reason, it just seems like it's extra hard. And but finding people you can trust is a huge thing. But so on the flip side of that, how do you try to inspire trust in yourself from the people that work under you? Like what kind of actions do you take, or what kind of things you do or things you say that you do to try to show them that you're a leader that they can trust and that you're willing to work as hard as them, if not more?
Yes, sir. No, I've found that that if people that work for you, if they realize that you're willing to literally, work, like you say, they work harder than they are, work as hard as they do, that man, they'll do just about anything for you. If they recognize that you're not just demanding things of them that you're not willing to do yourself. And one of the things I did early on was there is part of the fencing that's one of the most difficult parts whenever we go to put the boards on the fence. And for some reason, I just decided that that's what I was going to do, because that person in that position sets the pace and everything. But it's one of the harder things to do. And I just decided that's what I was going to do, and I basically do it every time. And that I think when guys see that it's inspiring as far as more than just, hey, you're working for me, so you do it, and then let's go, but they need, all of us, we need examples. There's a note in my Geneva Bible that I've written and hung over my desk, and speaking of a verse, and I think Judges, but it says that we ought always to set before us the example of valiant captains whom we ought diligently to follow. And just the idea that I've always tried to put myself around men and be around men and be with men that inspired me to be a better man. And it's huge. It makes such a difference. Courage is contagious, and hard work is contagious. And if you're willing to put out, then they really will too. If they're good young men.
Piggybacking on that, so you brought up Scripture. What other passages is in Scripture or biblical principles have guided you in your work, whether as leading or just even doing the hard work yourself, hands-on? What biblical principles are guiding you in this?
Well, when we were little kids, my dad, he had instituted a rule where every morning we read a Proverbs and a Psalm. I'll never forget, when we were young, me and one of my other brothers, we had a problem with being foolish all the time, just all the time. And so my dad had to sit down and go through the whole book of Proverbs, and we had to write down any time that it said the word fool, foolish,
Nice.
or I mean anything that was that word in any form, and write down the whole verse. And so, he was big on that in Proverbs and teaching diligence, and we had a hobby farm we grew up on, and we were, he bought a cow when I was 8, and we were up at 5 o'clock every morning milking the cow, and then the garden and this, that, and the other, and it just always, but he always built off of the Proverbs. We'd go to the house many mornings, and he would open the Word and teach the Word while around breakfast before he left for work, and but he really installed in me the recognition of diligence and the need for diligence, and I'm so glad he did, because I am by nature a lazy person. I just am. I recognize that in myself, that I really would prefer just to be lazy, and so just him instilling that in me, and that just being grounded in the Word, in so many of those Proverbs in my mind that just instantly pop into my mind, that he drove into me and taught, and really instilled in me of go to the ant, O sluggard, and the passages about the ants. They don't have a king, but they sow, and they they don't sow, but they work hard, and they store up for the winter, and so on and so forth. Solomon looked out and went by the field of a man lacking sense, and it was all grown up, and a little sleep and a little slumber and a little folding of the hands to sleep, and I could go on and on. Just they all, as a sluggard, as a door on his hinges, a sluggard on his bed, and just that idea of just a little bit of sleep, just a little bit of willingness to lay down and not be diligent. It will destroy us, and physically and spiritually. And so, just very grateful for the foundations that my father laid there. He really, really broke the ground and gave me a head start there.
Well, on that subject, we talk a lot about here on our show about the necessity for and mandate for as men for us to lead. Whether it be in our families or marriages, wherever else we're in.
Yes, sir.
So you're talking about not being lazy, and that I would say probably a lot of men listening would agree that they probably are prone to laziness. I think we all are. We're prone to selfishness. But what steps have you taken to combat that in your own life and in your work to not be lazy? Give maybe there's a man listening and he's going, yeah, I've got that problem and I need somewhere to kind of combat that, and I don't know where to start. So kind of give us some things you've done and maybe some places where any men listening that need to combat that can start.
One thing I struggle with is that, if I'm tempted to, if there's an excuse to not go to work, or, whatever, then there's always that temptation to, it might rain or this, that, and the other, and just, trying to train myself to that my default should be I'm always going to work, and it's only if there's an absolute necessity that I'm not going to, or if I've set aside time for my family or this, that, the other. But just to have that in my mind that it's an absolute necessity that I'm going, and I really have to in my line of work, because I set my own hours, and I value my flexibility highly, but when it rains, it's very difficult to do the work that I do while it's raining, or even if after it's rained, it's being, incredibly muddy and whatnot. It's very difficult. So when the weather is good, I've really got to get it done. Mm-hmm. So I think that drives me, just necessity, but just, I think I struggle more with, probably, spiritual, laziness than I do with physical. I maybe just because of how much my dad beat it into me, but it's when you have men working for you, there's also that drive of they have to work as well. They have to make income for their families, and
right.
And so but yeah, now probably Tony, to be honest with you, is just giving myself an incredible amount of responsibility. Just from the standpoint of, running a small small company and all that goes along with that, and having a fairly, what's incredible, but our culture considers to be a large family with 4 children. It's ridiculous that's considered a large family, but
right,
it is.
Right.
And then being heavily involved in church there and evangelism and those kind of things, and just being willing to take on the responsibility, and then you really don't have a choice. You don't really have an option to be lazy at that point. But you gotta get it done. But yeah, I'd say I struggle more with spiritual laziness. I know my wife could tell you that she going back to what you're saying there about leading. I have done a poor job of leading my family for the first several years there, and didn't want to do family worship for the longest time, and my wife wanted us to do something, and I just struggled to just want to do it, and I was just lazy and didn't want to, and finally became so convicted that I just had to, but just trying to formulate just habits in my life, whether it has to do with work or whether it has to do with my personal time with the Lord, or whether it's leading my family in worship and leading my family in the training and education of my children and these things. Trying to be consistent, I feel like is my biggest struggle, is being consistent. But there's nothing more rewarding than being consistent and being diligent, and then you turn around and you see the fruit of that in your children. That will drive you on for sure, and just to see the joy from your wife that you recognize, because I did a poor job of discipling her for the first several years of our marriage, probably first 3 to 4 years of our marriage. I feel like I did a really poor job, and there's been so much more joy in our marriage in the last several years with me taking that leadership role more seriously, and as the word says, washing her with the word and being a constant source of, discipling her and discipling our children and leading in family worship here at the home. And anyway, so.
Yeah, these are things we've talked about on the show, actually. We've talked about family worship. We talked about, what do you do if you haven't done it? Discipling, your wife, your children. And I mean, we have never been under the premise here that we are perfect men. We actually started to do this show for the reason that we know we're not perfect men, and we know we all need to grow. So hearing you talk about, your journey through that too, and we all have a continued journey too. We're all going to have to keep, we'll fail and we'll pick ourselves back up and keep trying to do better as we go. So that's good. I'm glad you said that, and I'm glad that our listeners got a chance to hear that. So we're wrapping up here at the end of our interview, but if you got any last words to say to maybe some of the men that are listening that are trying to figure out how to lead better, whether it be in their families or their marriage or whatever it might be, you got a couple words of wisdom you might give them in these last couple bits here?
Yes, sir. I think the only thing that comes to mind are just to not be afraid of taking responsibility, to not be afraid of leading. I'm telling you, our wives, for those of us that are married, our wives want nothing more than for us to lead and to lead boldly. I think everything really changed in my marriage when I started sitting down with my wife and laying out a vision for where our family was going. And I had no idea how much she needed that. But just that sitting down and casting a vision, like, hey, this is where we want to be in 10 years. This is where we want to be in 20 years. This is our goal. This is what we're after. And then these are the things we do to get there. And so that is huge, whether from a business standpoint or family or church or whatever it is. We've got to be men who are in the Word and who have vision for what needs to take place, and be willing to lead, to be bold about that and how we do it. And here we go, let's go. So anyway, just don't be afraid of taking responsibility. Don't be afraid of leading. We're all going to fall. We're going to mess up. We're going to make fools of ourselves. on a pretty regular basis, but it's worth it to lead those that God has put under us.
Good. Well, hey, sometimes our listeners want to reach out to our guests. They might have a follow-up question or just want to pick your brain for something. Is there a way that our listeners can get in contact with you?
Yes, sir. It'd probably be easiest on Facebook. I've got on it here this last fall, and it's been interesting to say the least.
This is crazy time to get on Facebook, man.
Yes, sir, no doubt. But I didn't know how many feminists I knew. But anyway,
yeah.
But yeah, no, Facebook, Tanner Cartwright. That's probably the easiest way. You can find me on there, and I usually keep up with that pretty close, so I'll respond.
All right, good. Well, Tanner, thanks for coming on. We appreciate your time, and we appreciate all the stories you've just told and the advice you've given. I think our listeners will too.
Yes, sir. Thank you all. I appreciate this podcast. It's been, I've enjoyed the episodes.
That was Tanner Cartwright, and you are listening to The Patriarchy on the Fight, Laugh, Feast Network. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back. So before the interview, we were talking about the definitions of mercy, and I think now we're going to talk about what you were saying, the 5 streams of mercy, right?
Yeah, so 5 streams or 5 ways you can show mercy or
stream sounds better. Everything's got to be water in evangelicalism, right? It's all water.
Yeah, yeah. But these streams of mercy, and they flow and then they sprinkle upon you.
Oh man.
Anyways, so we can sprinkle these streams of mercy upon others. So that's here's 5 different areas, and I think getting into these areas help us even define mercy, and it keeps us from in a very pietistic kind of mamby-pamby way when you think through these 5 areas. And I'm sure there may be others of ways of showing mercy to people, but these are 5 that Thomas Watson came up with, and 5 that I thought were pretty helpful. So the first way he says we can be merciful is to a person's reputation and name. Scripture says that a good name is better than great wealth. It's more desired than great wealth.
Mm.
Favor is better than silver or gold.
Harder to obtain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My dad used to say that like a reputation takes a lifetime to build, but can be lost in just one moment.
That's very true. Yes.
And so then you got to think how cruel it would be and unmerciful it is then to just seek to destroy a reputation of someone else.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Especially those under our charge, right? We have a sense of like protecting them. And then for us to turn around and like slander them or to receive slander about them, that's wicked.
Mm-hmm.
And there's different ways I think that we can not show mercy in that. As I've already said, it's receiving slander, speaking slander, it's gossip. It's not standing up when we hear somebody get slandered. We don't speak up and tell the truth.
Mm-hmm.
And all of this it's like murderous. We don't often think of this, but like when we think about bearing false witness today, we think about mainly just about lying about somebody.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But the actual thing is false witness is dealing with a court, a court trial, right? It's slandering somebody in a court trial, lying about them there. And the possibility being, of course, in a court case is that if you lie about the right crime, that person gets put to death.
Yep.
And so you think all the false witnesses and slanders about Jesus Christ.
Oh, man. Yep. Yeah.
And so to break the 9th commandment is to break the 6th commandment. That's why, the book of James says, if you break one, you break them all.
Yep.
And so to rob somebody of their good name. And so we got to be careful. And I think especially careful with the names of our brothers and sisters in Christ.
Amen.
Because they're the bride of Christ. The church is the bride of Christ. And I don't know about you, Tony, but if somebody starts talking bad about my wife, we're throwing down.
Yeah, I'm Italian, so that's a given. You don't talk bad about the women in my life. Yeah. It ain't gonna go well.
Yeah. And if that's for me and you, how much more for Jesus, who has like the nail prints for his wife?
Yes. Yeah.
So we ought to be merciful to the names of those under our charge. And kind of one more aspect about that is one way that you can, we've talked about receiving a bad report, actual slander, but another way to do that is always to be diminishing someone's worth and their dignity by making more of their vices than you do their virtues.
Yes. That's, oh man, that falls into parenting so much.
Yes, it does. So that's what I was about to say.
Yeah, I will admit, I have to remind myself all the time. I have to make sure, especially with my daughter too, to make sure that I praise her and talk about the things that she does well and good, and remind her that I love her. And that's, oh man, yeah, that's a good reminder, especially for fathers.
Yeah. So especially you think about like, if you're always saying to your son, you always do this.
Yes.
You always do that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And man, you're not being merciful to their name or their reputation, even though their name or reputation may not be fully developed. Right? It's
what are you talking about? My 4-year-old's got a rep. I don't know. No, that's so true. I'm glad that, and I'm not trying to puff myself up on this one. I'm glad that I generally don't use that kind of adjective, the sweeping terms on that. I'm not entirely sure why. I'm just glad I don't. But but for that, I think maybe my downfall in it is, even if I don't do that, I have to remember that, and it's hard because our children, especially when they're young, they tend to repeat the same kind of, or actually just the same mistake, not even the same kind, the same mistake over and over again. And it's you have to remind yourself to not make them feel like that has just defined them to you. And so I try my best to take the extra time after I've corrected my one of my kids, or disciplined them, whatever, how that had to go, to make sure that afterwards to talk with them, to explain with them that we will work through this. I will help you. You will get this. Don't worry. You will get this. That's part of why we're doing the discipline. But I've told my son, one of my sons in particular, who's having a hard time right now, listening to his mom, and but I've talked with him after each time and just saying, make sure I reassure him that I love him, that he's forgiven, that Daddy's not mad at you anymore. Now you've taken your punishment. You've said you're sorry. You've apologized to your mom. We're good. We're going to go on. We're going to do better. And I love you, and I'm going to help you through it. Daddy messed up like this when he was younger. That kind of thing, to make him understand that, yes, he did wrong, but he made it right. And now we're going to go forward. And this doesn't define, who you are now, that you're going to keep working and go through this. And one day, you'll be better at it.
All right, now, so that first stream now, Tony, it's an important stream, but it's kind of smaller. We're going to build up. The stream's going to get bigger as we go.
Go into the river.
Water.
To use another evangelical metaphor.
Yeah. Take me to the water. All right, here we go. So the next stream is being merciful to someone's estate. That is their property, their livelihoods. And this is very particular for employers.
Mm-hmm.
Make sure you pay your employees for their jobs.
And pay them a fair amount too, yeah. Yeah.
Now, fair being what you agreed upon, but also fair being, what the fair value of their work is.
Right.
And it's no small matter. The scriptures talk about that quite often. To withhold someone's earnings, to take away their livelihood, again, is to break the sixth commandment.
It's almost like that's happening right now in the world.
Yeah. We need to be very merciful there. And, if someone owes us a debt, right? It's not a sin for you to want to get paid back. You let somebody borrow something and you want to get paid back. That's a just thing.
Right.
But in the process of that, you need to have some mercy. So you remember the story that Jesus told about the man who owed a debt and he couldn't pay it. And then he begged the king, and the king forgave him. And then he went out and beat up somebody, like, give me my money back.
Right. Yeah.
And so we need to be, we don't want to follow that. Another thing that we ought to be careful about that's not merciful is like socialism and a bloated bureaucracy micromanaging every area of life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're taking away people's autonomy and freedom, and actually taking it away and giving it to somebody else.
Yeah. Now, a Christian society is going to look Christian even in its economics.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think greed and avarice also are just as wicked. And I think usury can be. The scriptures warn us about being quick to give a pledge, or quick to give money to others. It would be better to just give somebody something than to loan them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very much.
So, well, we could probably spend a whole episode on that one. Let's move on to the next stream.
Yeah.
The next stream is along with that. It's being merciful to the needs of others. Especially those under our charge, be merciful to their needs. Be merciful to the poor. A lot of churches call their ministries, what do they call them? To like the poor.
Mercy ministries.
Yes. So, and the church has done a great job of that throughout church history of mercy ministries, being merciful to someone's needs. And God has made us and placed us where we're at, whatever our station in life is, whether we have much or little. He's in charge of that. And part of the reason he does that is so that we would practice mercy. I was telling my church on this, Tony, on Sunday, was that I'm never going to tell them to be liberal. Like, don't ever be a liberal in politics or theology. But on this, be liberal. Give to the needs of others. Give liberally.
Yeah.
All right, we'll move on to the last two, and we'll wrap things up. So the fourth one is to be merciful to offenses.
I think that's where most people think of mercy. I think is that one in particular.
Yeah, and I think there's truth to that, like being willing to overlook an offense, slow to anger.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And man, during this time right now with all this, we've got a great opportunity to practice that.
Yes. It's almost like we're being told to practice that. Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
Because I think everybody's kind of afraid. Everybody's operating from fear of one thing or the other. Yeah, we're going to say things, and where a multiple of words are, where there's many words, there's great sin.
Yep.
And so having some mercy for people's offenses.
I think a lot of people right now, at least I've been trying to remind myself that right now, people have different circumstances in this. Some people have a job still. Some people don't. Some people, they're not sure if they're going to have a job much longer. Depends on the state you're in, depends on what your governor is. There's a lot of different circumstances. And there are some people that have been through losing a job before. There's some people that haven't been through losing a job before. There's some people that have money saved up, don't have money. There's a lot of different circumstances in that. So while I don't, why it's easy to say, don't act in fear, don't give in to fear, which again is a good practice, but it's easy to say, not easy to do. And people learn that through experience. I learned that through experience. I'm much less worried now than I would have been a year or two ago because of experiences I've had through that. Some of you know what that is. One day we'll talk about that, not this episode. But I just try to take that into consideration when people freak out a little bit or get a little too angry. And sometimes that just means being like, hey, you know what? Why don't we just revisit this conversation, another time? And I love you. And you kind of just come back to it later or something. It's, maybe they calm down, maybe they don't. But I don't know. I just, right now in particular, that's how I'm at least trying my best to operate. I don't know if I'm doing that perfectly, probably not, but.
Well, this especially applies, we talk about leadership, is people under us are going to offend us.
Mm-hmm.
Right? They may have a rebellious attitude. They may not agree with our leadership. And we do discipline. In fact, it's not merciful to not discipline.
Mm-hmm.
It's not merciful to not uphold your authority. The Westminster Catechism under the Fifth Commandment says one of the duties of superiors is to maintain their station.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not merciful to downplay your station and always be giving in and always overlooking sins that are harming others.
Right,
but
it perpetuates it. It makes it continue on, and that's not merciful.
But it's also not merciful to be nitpicking and to allow, when that happens, the sins that you've got to correct, to be doing that just from your anger because you've been offended.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's a good reminder.
Well, that leads us to the fifth and the final thing, which is these first four streams are they're very much worldly in one sense, of like earthy, down to earth where we're at.
Yeah, I get you.
And the fifth one, if you left the fifth one off, you're not all the way there. You're missing off the highest point, which is showing mercy to someone's soul. And what I mean by that is people are going to hell.
Mm. Yeah.
And they are at war with God. And the most merciful way you can be merciful to them is to bring them to the place where they can get true mercy for their sins and grace. And that's Jesus Christ. So preaching the gospel, teaching, exhorting, rebuking. Right.
Yeah.
And that includes, go ahead. What were you about to say?
I was to say today's day and age, even in Western Christianity, that's, I would say probably most people would agree with that on paper, right? But when we talk about going out, actually, going to, not just, I know we talk about going to the abortion mills, but not even that, like going out to sporting events, when we can go out, right? Can't do that right now. But going out to sporting events, going out to universities, going out to just, gatherings. I mean, things like some cities like Chicago, for example, have, gatherings for like food festivals and things like that. Going to all of those and passing out tracts, passing out gospels, open air preaching, talking with people that are passing by. Some people respond very well to that. I mean, we've both seen that in things we've done, but there are obviously always the stories of people that respond terribly to it. And ironically, you probably know what I'm going to say. There's usually a lot of people that will tell you that they are a Christian and they don't agree with what you're doing. You should just do that in church, or you should, not be out here doing that. You're bothering people. When you're trying your absolute best to be gentle and kind, and you're not you're not being mean to anybody when you're open air preaching or handing out whatever. You're saying, hey, would you like to take one? This is for you. Have a nice day. Would you like to talk for a minute? All that. Nothing wrong with it. But people have a really hard time with that one in practice, I think. I think you'd agree with me on that one. I think we've both seen that out in the world when we actually put that one into practice. Yet it's arguably one of the most important of them. I mean, you're sharing the one thing in all of human history and all of creation, that can save them from their sins. And to not do that is absolutely unmerciful.
And I think the key in this is the pity.
Yep.
And the love, right? There's a way to say you're being merciful to someone's soul and to come at it with pride. Or another way is like every disagreement you have with somebody is because they have some kind of moral flaw.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
so you've got to rebuke everybody that disagrees with you about anything, because obviously you're showing mercy by rebuking them for everything.
Yep.
Well, the flaw there is in you.
Yes.
If that's the case.
Very much so.
But with pity on someone and a real concern, then it's gonna come across. Even with someone, if they have a real, they stop and really think about it. It might take them a while. They might get angry at first when they get a rebuke, but it's going to come across that there was genuine concern for their soul. So there's a way to preach about hell and sin, and with hard, strong language, manly language, firm language that is merciful. And there's a way to do that, which is, it's a counterfeit, and it comes across like you actually want people to go to hell.
Yep, and I've seen that. Yeah, actually up near Cleveland, up near me, a few of my friends and I will go up there and do outreaches and whatnot. And one of my friends in particular has a great outreach he does quite often up there. And he will tell me about, there are other street preachers, and he'll describe really exactly what you're describing, that it's not, they're not there because they love people. They're not there because they pity anybody. They're there. They seem quite angry, but they're there because they think they're better. And go ahead.
Yeah. No, I was going to say, and even then, sometimes that can be hard to distinguish just on the first listen.
Sure.
And it can be hard to tell. Well, what I mean is about to say is sometimes having pity on one group of people will lead you to be harder in your rebuke and even stronger on another group. Like if someone is beating a child, you're going to have pity on the child, and you're going to step in with some physical force to stop it.
Yeah.
Like if they're, and it won't look like pity upon the person you're trying to stop.
This is true.
Right, you know what I mean?
Yeah, outwardly, yeah.
Same thing, like people are murdering children. It may not look like pity when you're exposing that sin of the abortionist and you're calling them to repentance and rebuking them strongly. Or as a pastor, I don't think everybody needs to do what I'm about to say. I think this may be reserved for ordained people. But ordained ministers, ordained men, part of their charge is preaching God's gospel even to civil magistrates, and that their pity upon the congregants and the people may come across very harsh rebukes to civil magistrates, and there's a balance to that. Obviously, there's a respect we ought to have. I think we can get away from that, and everybody's rebuking civil magistrates all the time for every little aspect.
I don't know if that's even rebuke right now. I think it's what, to be honest, I just think it's what the Bible calls is grumbling. I think people, not everybody, but I think what we're talking about right now and we're seeing right now is a lot of people that they're just grumbling. They don't really have, I just wish I would see more folks, I fully support protests, doing it in the rightful way. I just wish I would see more folks have exactly what we're talking about, ironically, right? They have mercy and pity on people that are unbelievers and go to them and not just be like, hey, you're taking away my rights. Instead of going and saying to them, this is, I appreciate that you have concern for people. I feel like this isn't the right way to go about it. Let me open the Bible here and let's go through and see what God's word says about, how to maybe handle a quarantine or handle whatever, and go through that. And then through that, bring them into the gospel and share that with them and say, but ultimately the reason I came here today is because, I love you and I care about your eternal soul. And and share the gospel with them. And certainly that takes more forethought than, making a sign that says that our governor is non-essential it's kind of funny. But I mean, it takes more forethought than that, and it takes more care. And I really wish that people would consider that when they're going to a protest or when they're maybe making a post or writing a letter, whatever, however you're contacting your civil magistrate. I just wish that there'd be more of that pity and concern.
Yeah, it's a difficult balance, and there's pity for those being harmed by unjust decrees.
Right, absolutely. Yeah.
And so a rebuke and even a strong sarcasm, all these things are useful tools. And so and none of them are necessarily opposed to the idea of mercy.
Mm-hmm.
But they're tools in our tool belt, and the true wisdom, which is knowing which one to use at which time.
You don't just use the hammer all the time?
No, I mean,
you pick up the hammer and everything's a nail. Yeah, I know. I'm just joking, obviously.
Well, I think we've covered quite a lot, and there's a lot to think through. And so, you got any final parting thoughts?
No, I think that's good. I think that's good for this week. If anybody's listening and you like this episode and you like our show, and maybe you're a longtime listener, maybe you're a first listener, every show is somebody's first show, go to fightlaughfeast.com, click to sign up, become a member, and use the code Patriarchy when you do. It goes support our show, support the network, which has other shows on it. So if you're not familiar with the Fight Laugh Feast Network, there are plenty of other shows on there. We have an app now that you can go get, and you can listen to all the other shows. There are great shows. So please go to fightlaughfeast.com, click to sign up to become a member, and use the code Patriarchy when you do if you want to support our show. So until next time, if you have not yet bowed your knee to Christ, repent and believe. And if you have, this is our call to you. Build, fight, protect, lead. This is the Patriarchy.